Welcome to In Our Community. I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host, and I am so pleased and honored to introduce my two guests today. David Forderer is a disability advocate appointed by Governor Jerry Brown to the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. And David represents the Central Coast region. My other guest is Wayne Glusker, is a professional photographer who has been assisting David with his advocacy work since 2009. Wow, welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne.
You're so welcome. I'm so pleased to have both of you here. And what you're doing, David, is so important. And first of all, I want to find out, tell us about what you can from your early life.
Well, the reason I got into it is because both of my families were adopted. Both of my families were very patriotic. My family that lived in New York and my adopted family when I moved out here. They were both patriotic families. And one of my heroes was President Kennedy, when he said, act not what your country can do for you, act what you can do for your country.
Say a little bit more about your early upbringing, David, in New York.
I grew up I was a product of the New York foster care system. Well, my parents gave me up at first because they did not know how severe my disabilities would be. Now, my biological parents gave me up at birth. Then I became a ward of New York State. And I grew up in the New York foster care system. But I was only in one foster home until I got adopted by my dad, Jim Forderer.
Here in California.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so the two people that fostered you in New York, say a little bit about them. Who were they?
They were a married couple, and they took care of lots of kids over the years, and they had 3 of their own biological children.
Right. And what did they do in life? The father was?
The father was he was Navy.
He was
In the Navy.
Oh, okay.
He was in the Navy.
Yeah.
He was a Navy guy.
Yeah.
And then the mother was my foster mom was a stay-at-home mom because they were both a product of the Depression and World War II. they grew up, they were a young couple at that time.
I see.
They were also very
Patriotic.
and political, right?
Yeah.
Didn't you used to tell me that you'd sit around the dinner table and talk politics?
Yeah.
So I think that was his early introduction.
So how old were you at that time, David?
Like 5 or 6.
6 years old it started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really becoming entwined in politics by his parents, his foster parents, who believed that everybody was equal, and
they believed that this country was the best country in the world. Period.
Yeah.
And the father, being the foster dad, being in the military, sparked David's interest in the military, right?
Yeah.
What would you be doing if you weren't disabled?
I would be an officer in the United States Marine Corps.
The Marines. You like them better than the Navy. They're tougher.
No, my older brothers were both Marines.
I see. Yeah.
And they took me around their parties, you know. The Marines are my guys. And also, Marines and the Army's okay too.
I see. The Army's okay. Well, you're such an all-American, right? And David, can we go on from there?
Yeah.
Okay. So not only were you interested in the service, but how did you become interested in politics?
That's easy. One of my heroes growing up was President. I had 2 Labor presidents. One I mentioned already was President Kennedy, and the other was President FDR.
And I bet you have so much knowledge about those people, those presidents.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how some people are just so into politics, and you still are, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So at age, what age did you leave New York, and then you were adopted by your California mom and dad?
10. But when we go back to New York for a moment, even when I was a kid, I was a politician. Because I was one of the best known kids in my neighborhood.
As a politician?
I basically ran that town because everybody knew me as a kid. And if anybody bothered me, the whole neighborhood would tell the kid not to bother me.
Yeah, like a good politician, he had his constituency lined up from an early start. Everybody in the neighborhood.
Isn't that interesting that just came from your heart, so to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love public service even to this day.
He loves
His public service, being a servant of the public has always been a passion of his, and his advocacy work and his political career, definitely. Yeah.
Because every day I go to work at the council, I realize I'm there to protect the rights of about 40 million California with disabilities.
Yeah. So, what happened after you graduated from San Francisco State University?
Well, let's go back a little bit.
Okay.
His education started actually in high school, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that.
What happened in high school as far as your advancing your political interests?
I was appointed to then Governor Pete Wilson's education plan on 2020 for people with disabilities.
As a high schooler. So
Yeah.
then Governor Pete Wilson picked him out to serve on a committee as a high schooler. So it started in high school, even furthering his political interests, right?
Yeah.
And then from high school, you then moved on to what college?
De Anza in Cupertino, yeah.
Yeah, De Anza Junior College. And what happened there as far as your politics? What happened?
I was the first person with a disability that I know of ever elected to the Anza Council, the Anza College governing board with a disability.
The governing board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
student council
Yeah.
at De Anza.
Yeah.
Well, he was the first individual who was disabled to actually serve on that board.
What an honor.
Yeah.
I was the first elected person.
So he had to run for office. He had to get votes and everything. So again, early on, he's learning how to woo the constituency to help his career.
How'd you do that? How did you get those people to vote for you, David?
Well, a lot of them were my friends. Because you have to understand, I am a very gregarious person, as you can know. And I can talk to anybody, and that's why I love to do what I do, which is promote the protection and interest of people like myself with disabilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to do that, you have to be able to talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And it just comes from your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel, David, when this happens to you?
What?
That you know, your successes, that you get through all this.
Hey, I'm not doing this by myself. I got people like Wayne.
Yeah.
People like the executive director of the council. I got the chairwoman of the council. They all, and I am perfectly, and I got the governor of this state that is willing to give me the opportunity and the honor to serve and help these people I mentioned earlier to help me serve the people of this state. The people of California.
Very true.
And isn't it true that with a disability, that doesn't mean that you have a disability psychologically?
No.
Yeah.
Right?
Disabilities come in many forms. It's pretty obvious to see that David is disabled in the sense that he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
But there are disabilities that affect the mind. Mental illness is very hard to determine in individuals.
Yeah.
Of course, autism is on a sharp rise. That's very difficult to determine at some points in some people, with Asperger's particularly.
Yeah.
They appear to be very, very normal, and it could be just something as a loud noise that sets them off. But even though David is disabled and requires 24-hour care, his mind is sharp as a tack.
That's what I mean.
And his passion is politics, and that shines through in his advocacy work and the trust in the people here in the California, right, Dave?
Yeah.
That trust in you, all the people.
Especially the people of California and the governor of the state. I have the trust of the governor of the state. And with me, that really means a lot.
Well, even before the governor appointed you, which we can talk about later on, let's go back to your De Anza days. From De Anza College, you moved on to where for your education?
Then when they got there.
So you ended up having to leave the valley here, right? And you moved to San Francisco, right? Right?
Yeah.
Which is a big move for somebody who's disabled. It's not something you just pack up your goods and go, right? You've got to find care. You've got to rearrange people to take care of you, especially David, because he does require 24-hour around-the-clock care. So you moved to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Became a student at San Francisco State, studying what?
Criminal justice and international relations. That's why I think it's national security policy.
Yeah, so international relations, specialized in national security.
Wow.
Yeah, so besides, right, law enforcement.
Yeah.
Yep. So kind of a double major there.
Yeah.
Going to San Francisco State. Now, you got to realize at this time too, David, things weren't absolutely smooth for you, right?
No.
Yeah, the ADA bill had not been passed yet, so people that were disabled were still struggling to gain some sort of rights.
I mean, it was passed, but they were still implementing the idea.
Right. It took a long time for people to even begin to adopt the idea that we need to treat people that are disabled differently than we've treated before. Back, of course, before I met David, I spent time back on the East Coast, and I remember distinctly living in Connecticut, where there was a state hospital where pretty much almost all the individuals who were disabled were locked up. And that's were the days of state hospitals.
Yeah.
There were very, very little of people living outside, and unless the family felt comfortable at raising that child, they were all put into hospitals.
And they were encouraged. That's what most parents were encouraged to do. Up until the 1970s. Most parents were encouraged with disabilities were encouraged to put them in institutions.
Yeah, so straight from the hospital staff would talk to the parents and say, look, it's probably better off that your child go to a hospital where they'll get full care. They have people that know how to treat them rather than you try to struggle at home. That was the mindset. Of course, in California, being the progressive state, things looked a little bit differently, although wasn't perfect by any means. So let's expound on your stay at San Francisco State. Things didn't go really well for you there all the time, too. What happened there?
I had to take my university the course over non-compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
And what was the court case centered around?
The elevators were not accessible, and the classrooms were not accessible either.
So still to this day, we have buildings in not only California but across the United States that have not really complied to the ADA law. There are many places, restaurants, office buildings that are antiquated, some from the 60s, 70s, maybe even 80s, that are not up to compliance that allow someone in a wheelchair to readily be able to negotiate the building itself. So David, as a student at San Francisco State, had to take the university to court to force them to be able to comply and make doors bigger to get through, classrooms easier to negotiate, and the elevators big enough to get a wheelchair in it.
And even put elevators that control down low enough that I could reach them to get to class.
Yeah, so imagine the controls up too high, even with his limited range.
Yeah.
They have to be down low for him to be able to operate the elevator. Otherwise,
I got stuck in the elevator because I could not get anybody to open the door so I could get out of the elevator.
Yeah, but David, if you never did anything else, what a story that is. My goodness. David, you're a hot guy.
oh yeah, he is.
Oh, just for a moment. Wayne, how did you meet David?
Well, interestingly enough, my wife's family attended a Methodist church in Los Altos United Methodist. And we had we had two boys that we raised, and both boys wanted to go there because of their youth program. And while there, of course, I knew about David's family, Marion and Jim, his mom and dad, who adopted him. And they have a great story, of course, because of the number of boys they adopted. They adopted 27 different boys on their own. And one day when we were at church service, I didn't see David that often, but he did come occasionally. And this particular time, he came up to me and basically said hi and wanted to know if I'd be interested in helping him with a board that he was thinking about joining. So I innocently enough asked, well, how much time are we talking about? And he said, well, they meet once a month for 2 hours. I thought to myself, sure,
Yeah.
I could do that.
Yeah.
Now, I knew about a couple of his other brothers who I would see regularly. One of them, Kyle, who was also disabled, he was a little older than little younger than my oldest son, and just slightly older than my youngest son, but my youngest son took to him. So I knew a lot about him because my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, they would hang around a lot with Kyle because of their children were very interested in being with him.
And I knew this law, I knew that family too, because at that time I was also very involved in the church.
Right, in the youth group
Yeah.
and in the church. And both my sister-in-law and husband were very, very active. They have 3 children, and they all went to Los Altos and became part of the youth program. So they were very familiar with David's family, the Forderer Aiken family. And especially Mom. Mom would be, Marion Aiken would be the one who brought boys to church and still does to this day. So I started with David with just thinking that we'd only be together once a month for 2 hours. And little did I know that my life would radically change.
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing about me joining David is, in my family, there is no one disabled. So I knew, let's say, nothing about the disabled community, literally other than just knowing that people are disabled, but I didn't know it to what level, what the different types of disabilities affected. And through David, of course, and his willingness to share with me his passion, my passion grew for being an advocate also. And as his career advanced in his political career, my tagging along and assisting him allowed me to grow exponentially also. So David, the first board that he joined was what?
San Andreas Regional Center.
So the San Andreas Regional Center is one of 21 regional centers across the state of California. And the regional centers are the funding source for the disabled population. So David's housing, his meals, his care is all funded through the regional center. And because California is such a large state, there are many more regional centers than a typical state like New Jersey or Minnesota. And these regional centers all have directors and all have staff that individually meet with the clients like David and help support them to be a full, included individual in the community. And David felt, well, why don't you tell the story how grateful you were about the regional center that you then what?
I felt so grateful to the agency that their own mission, their whole reason to be in existence was to promote the independence of people with disabilities.
Yeah, he was so thrilled that they were willing to take the time as individuals. The staff is pretty big. They've got a couple of hundred people that work in the agency. And
these guys put hours and hours.
Yeah, many of them work 50-hour weeks, 55-hour weeks, serving the disabled community. Yeah.
Guess what?
Yeah.
We are just about to end this show. So we are going to do another show because we still have so much to talk about.
Great.
But I want to thank you, David. I'm really, really, really impressed with you. I just think you are wonderful. I really do. And what you're doing and your life story. And of course, what would we do without Wayne? Wayne is a blessing.
Thank you.
You are.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I want to thank both of you. We'll be back.
And thank you for your time because this community show is a blessing to me. It allows the people in California to see what people with disabilities can do.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. And I want to thank Robin and Bill. This is what would we do without you? And of course, I always say this. Wait till you hear this, David. I want to thank our viewers for watching, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye.